Hello, everyone. My name is Nancy Steves, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this online spiritual gathering of SSUC, Southminster Steinhauer United Church, where we are spiritual seekers united in community, separated for safety, united in purpose and in quest. Thank you for choosing to take this time to be still and inspired, time to be comforted and challenged, time to rest in the gift of music and story and reflection. We welcome each of you wherever you are this day, and we welcome in particular those who have been participating with us on Friday evening and all day Saturday in the amazing experience of Expressing Wonder, our conference so skillfully prepared, planned, and hosted by SSUC Saskatoon. I am joined in welcoming you by my teammate, Christopher New, our instrumentalists you've heard from already, Pam and Janet and Dawn, our song leaders, Deb and Pam, and our tech team, Andrea and Brett. We're also joined today with special guests from West Hill United Church in Scarborough, kin in our shared quest for an expansive spirituality. Greta Vosper will be sharing a reflection with us. Scott Kearns, composer and pianist, along with Babette from West Hill as vocalist, will lead us in singing some of Scott's music this morning. Let's take a moment just to situate ourselves in time as the harvest moon begins to wane, as geese gather in the fields, readying themselves for their southern journeys. As trees let go of the leaves they've loved all year. As we turn in this time of turning inward toward a season of reflection. And let's take a moment to consider where we are in our place, to honor the legacy of the land on which we each find ourselves, acknowledging its story, its first peoples. Some of us are on treaty lands, others of us on unceded territory. I invite you to take a moment to type in the device that you are participating with us on the name of that land on which you find yourselves, its first and ancient peoples, or to speak that to yourself where you are just now, acknowledging those of us who find ourselves in Edmonton and in Saskatoon. Honor the storied land of Cree and Métis people where we find ourselves, land that has welcomed generations of migrants, refugees, newcomers, all of us, partners in Treaty 6. This morning we honor the gifts of the natural world, the beings with whom we share this magnificent planet, and the deep humanity planted in each of us as we sing together our wonder and our awe. We sing with Scott's leadership at the piano and Babette's voice to guide us.
I sing a song to the mountains, I sing a song to the sea, valley and stream, flower and tree, I sing to. I sing a song to the lion,
Hello. I want to share a story with you, a story that has on its surface great fun and in the midst of words and images great meaning. It's a story entitled One by Catherine Otoshi. Blue was a quiet color. Blue enjoyed looking up at the sky, floating on the waves, and on days he felt daring, splashing in rain puddles. Every once in a while, Blue wished that he could be more sunny like yellow, or bright like green, more regal like purple, or outgoing like orange. But overall, he liked being blue, except when he was with Red. Red was a hothead. He liked to pick on Blue. Red is a great color, he'd say. Red is hot. Blue is not. Then Blue would feel bad about being blue. Sometimes yellow comforted Blue. Blue is a very nice color, she'd say. But yellow never said that in front of Red. She never said, "Stop picking on Blue." Green, purple, and orange thought Blue was nice too. But they never told Red to stop either. Every time Red said something mean, and no one spoke up, he got bigger and bigger and bigger. Soon Red grew so big that everyone was afraid of him. No one dared stop him. Red picked on all the colors. And then everyone felt a little blue. Until One came. One had a different shape with bold strokes and squared corners. One was funny. One made the colors laugh. Red saw this and got very hot. "Stop laughing," he told Yellow. "Stop laughing," he told Green. "Stop laughing," he told Purple and Orange. And they did. Red rolled up to One. "Stop laughing," he told One. But One stood up straight like an arrow and said, "No." Red was so mad. But One wouldn't budge. So Red rolled away. One turned to the colors and said, "If someone is mean and picks on me, I, for one, stand up and say no." Then Yellow felt a bit brave and said, "Me too." Green agreed and said, "Me 3." Then Purple became 4 and Orange became 5. Blue saw the colors change. Blue also wanted to count. Red grew red hot. He felt left out. He grew hotter and hotter and hotter. Red raced over to Blue and said what he always did. "Red is hot and Blue is not." But this time Blue stood up tall and became 6. "Red can be really hot," he said, "but Blue can be super cool." Red blew a fuse. He tried to roll over Blue. But everyone took a stand and said no. Seeing them standing tall made Red feel very, very, very small. Then Red turned even redder and began rolling away. It's at this moment that Blue called out, Can red be hot and blue be cool? Red stopped in his tracks. Red can count too, said one. Red rocked and rolled and turned into 7. Everyone counts, they shouted. Then Red laughed and joined the fun. Sometimes it just takes one. This story by Catherine Otoshi is about a bully. How together we can stand up and say no to behavior that hurts us or hurts another. But deeper than that, this story is also about the red 7s in all of us. The way we can so easily act on our inside need to know ourselves or have worth in ourselves only in comparison to others. Red is hot, blue is not. It makes it easy to be a larger and larger red for any of us. And as the reds of the world, everything is seen through our red glasses. And when things don't go as easily as they always have in the past for us reds, it's easy to grow red hot. Those other colors teach red that everyone counts, and red is just one number among many. All are necessary. We all count, even the smaller and the rightly sized red. So today, we light our candle. If you have one at home, we invite you to light it with us. Our community candle, a symbol that keeps us connected through thick and thin, though together or apart. And today, this light reminds us that it only takes a spark. It only takes one to light the way, one to speak, one to stand, one to remind us all that everyone counts.
Light of love shine through.
Good morning, and thank you for welcoming me here to Expressing Wonder, an opportunity for people across Canada and perhaps around the world to gather in this virtual way to explore some of the things that are most important to us right now. Over these past several months, we've been feeling discomfort because of a number of things, not just what forces us to be together virtually, that is the pandemic, but also the changes in politics and the emerging understanding, the depth of that understanding that is shifting and changing around race and our participation in a system that has accommodated a racist perspective for so long. And so today, while I hope to speak to you in an inspirational way, I think I'll probably be picking up on many of the themes that have been shared by those who have spoken before me on this weekend. And I'm hoping that as we explore these topics, we are empowered to find new ways to be in our own lives and in the communities that we find so important and so meaningful for us at this time. The realities of the pandemic are what keep us apart. And we're apart in so many more ways than just not able to come together as groups. We're apart because of our intimate relationships, the friends that we have, that we are normally close to, that we share our lives with. We don't get to spend time with them as we used to do. We don't share the stories about what's going on in our lives except over Zoom or the telephone or maybe by email. And that physical contact of a hug that ends a visit with a friend or that concludes a service in a church on a Sunday morning, the loss of that has been huge. So I'm hoping that in whatever way we can, through these virtual gatherings, we're able to share a little bit of who we are in a way that allows each of us to be vulnerable, that we go away from what it is that we've watched, feeling our hearts shift and change, and that little bit of crunch that happens when we are moved on our axis to see the world and understand it differently. Because of the challenges that have been taking place around the world, triggered by the George Floyd murder in the United States, but that have been ongoing for so long, too long, we have been picking up and reading things. We've been watching stuff on television. We've been listening to podcasts. The congregation I serve, West Hill United, has done a book study on the book, Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility. And a number of them came together, people from Canada, West Hills community, and the United States, to explore the realities of white fragility and what exactly it means. Like, why are we so fragile when it comes to that conversation about race? Why is it that we feel ourselves kind of prickling when we think, well, you know, we're pretty good people, we're not racist. But DiAngelo and so many others have helped us see that our assumptions about our racism or our lack thereof are assumptions that need to be challenged and reoriented. Similarly to that podcast that we listen to, like NPR's Code Switch, can help us to see and understand by hearing the voices of people who come from perspectives that we are unfamiliar with, that we don't run into on a daily basis, whether because we're Canadian, because we're white, because we live rurally or we live in an urban setting. It brings together voices that mix all of that up and challenge us to see and understand racism differently. The United Church of Canada, many of us who are at this gathering, logging in from wherever, know and love the United Church of Canada. We've been part of it all our lives, some of us. Some of us have found it a little more recently. But we are progressive Christians. We are people who consider ourselves liberal. We are spiritual seekers. And we're all doing good things. Our communities challenge us to think in ways that are right on the edge of what needs to change in our society. And the United Church has always been there, quite frankly, opening the doors to conversations about gender way back when women weren't allowed to be ministers, ordaining them and allowing them to serve even beyond the days when men came home from the war, allowing married women to remain in the public, talking about abortion long before that was an okay thing to talk about, allowing LGBTQ people to be ordained and to serve in the United Church, even though the support for those people in those early days was abysmal and lacking in many cases. But we've all been doing great things over the course of these years, and yet we still find ourselves challenged by these conversations. I'm going to read to you a piece that many of you will know. It's from Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from a Birmingham jail. And it speaks to us, the moderate Christians, progressive though we think we may be. I must make two honest confessions to you, my Christian and Jewish brothers. First, I must confess that over the last few years, I've been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in the stride toward freedom is not the white citizen's counselor or the Ku Klux Klaner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you on the goal you seek, but I can't agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically feels that he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by the myth of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait until a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. Our communities are doing things that we think help make a change in the world. West Hill is undergoing some significant changes right now. We just sold our building to the Boys and Girls Club of East Scarborough. We know that the building is going to be filled now with children that reflect the community beyond our walls. Predominantly Black, East Asian, Southeast Asian, people who don't reflect the people who have normally been inside that sanctuary. We are, like many United Churches, an older white community, but we are excited about the fact that our building is going to be used to serve the community and to build strong adults out of the children that are growing up there. One of the things that we started to do just before that sale was even on the horizon was to talk with some of the creative leaders in the community who had been at West Hill and participated in our services, spoken at our services. I invited two spoken word artists, Dwayne Morgan and Randella J, to come and talk to us about what would they want us to do if we were in the position of actually doing big things in the community. Where would they ask us to spend our time and our money? And they challenged us to create of our space a performing arts center for creatives who had no access to that in Scarborough. And so we started galloping along that course, already incorporating a not-for-profit called Third Space Community Arts that would support the development of the performing arts and creative work in Scarborough. Not because we think that performing arts and creative work in Scarborough is the most important thing, but because we know that that's the vehicle through which values and virtue can be taught and will be embraced by this generation and future generations. And so we're excited about the fact that we will have in our space members who aren't white, members of the wider community who aren't white, but are mixed. And so we're congratulating ourselves on that and feeling really, really good that, we actually started that before the whole George Floyd thing blew up. We were on the cutting edge of that. Personally, I grew up in a house that had Black people living on the third floor, students from international countries. I've spoken often about that, how that's why I have no issues when it comes to race. Brene Brown says we cannot grow when we are in shame, and we can't use shame to change ourselves or others. But I know that we can't feel the need for change until we have experienced viscerally the shame of who we are. And so I tell you that story about West Hill and the story about my growing up and my assertion that I'm not racist to bring home the fact that we are so not ready for what it is that we are challenged to do when it comes to reflecting on who we are and how we interact in this world. The biggest read for me over these past months has been Layla Saad's Me and White Supremacy. Particularly convicting when she notes that it's liberal people like me who are often the worst offenders. We just wipe the idea of being racist off ourselves, and we're the educated ones. We're the ones who are tolerant. We don't need to worry about that, but let me read to you some excerpts from Layla's book. White exceptionalism is when we think that we aren't actually racist. White exceptionalism has shown up every time you saw one of the reflective journaling questions in her book and thought, I don't do that, or that doesn't apply to me. I have never or would never think that. Just reading that chilled me to the bone. Because, of course, I read their journaling questions and said, I don't do that. The reality is that you have been conditioned since you were a child to believe in white superiority through the way your history was taught, through the way race was talked about, and through the way students of color were treated differently from you. You have been educated by institutions that have taught white superiority through curricula that favor a white-based narrative, through the lack of representation of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and through the way these institutions handled acts of racism. It's so seeped into us that we didn't even notice. Here is a radical idea that I would like you to understand. White silence is violence. It actively protects the system. It says, I am okay with the way things are because they do not negatively affect me and because I enjoy the benefits I receive with white privilege. We can't grow if we stay in shame. Brené Brown is right about that. But experiencing who we are and our truths in relation to white superiority and white supremacy in our country are very significant, important conversations for us to have. So where is the United Church in this challenge right now? We've been having the conversation about race for a couple of decades at least, as I recall. Studies have been done and we've been talking about the challenges, and we've been inclusive whenever someone crossed our threshold and welcomed them into our communities. But far and wide, our congregations continue to be predominantly white. And how is it that we can change that? Is there anything that we can do that can make that different? I want to read the second thing. I'm going to read the second thing. Remember when I read the Martin Luther King's letter from the Birmingham jail? He said there were two things. Here's the second one. There was a time when the church was very powerful. It was during that period that the early Christians rejoiced when they were deemed worthy to suffer for what they believed. In those days, the church was not merely a thermometer that recorded the ideas and principles of popular opinion. It was the thermostat that transformed the mores of society. Wherever the early Christians entered a town, the power structure got disturbed and immediately sought to convict them for being disturbers of the peace and outside agitators. But they went on with the conviction that they were a colony of heaven and had to obey God rather than men. They were small in number, but big in commitment. They were too God-intoxicated to be astronomically intimidated. Things are different now. The contemporary church is so often a weak, ineffectual voice with an uncertain sound. It is so often the arch supporter of the status quo. Far from being disturbed by the presence of the church, the power structure of the average community is consoled by the church's often vocal sanction of things as they are. Before I unpack some of that, I want to talk to the question of who God is for me, who God can be for us. Because I'm known as not believing in God, people believe that I don't have any understanding of what that word might mean. But over the course of liberal Christianity's evolution, the word God has come to mean so many things that it's almost meaningless without a definition. And so I'll give you the definition that I would use if I were to use that word God. For me, it's built on the theology of Martin Buber, the I-thou construct of relationship. That I can use you for what I can get from you, and you can use me for what you can get from me. Or we can make what exists between us something that is sacred. It can be something of beauty. It can be my looking for ways that I can serve and be present to you in the ways that you need and you can articulate. And you looking for the ways that you can be present to me in the ways that I need, that I might be able to articulate. And so we build this bond of beauty, this bond of love between us. Extrapolate that concept to all of the contacts that you have. And then, in a mind-blowing exercise, expand it to all the contacts that they have, and then that they have, and then that they have. And pretty soon we see that the fibers of relationship built on love are vast and can be powerful. And so if we are to think about living in a way that responds with dignity to that web of responsibility, to that web, that bond of love that goes out far beyond just the relationships we have one-on-one with the people in our lives, that exists through them and through their contacts and through the people that they love and through the relationships that they have built far beyond what our personal privilege might do for us. And so God, for me, is the vast, immense power of that love that goes far and vastly beyond anything I might imagine. Might I hold myself responsible to that instead of just responsible to a concept that no longer holds for me and for many others? Could we shift and see our responsibility to that understanding of God, if we have to use that word, or to that bond of love, or to those degrees of separation that bind us to one another as parts of the human family, and then perhaps even to all of life? If we were to stand and convict ourselves by what it is that Martin Luther King Jr. said to his Christian brothers and sisters from that Birmingham jail, will we not have to say that we would choose not to simply sit down in the face of another's suffering, that we would choose not to remain silent when another cries out in pain, that we would choose not to be part of a system that continues to oppress and divide. I think that the challenges that Martin Luther King mentioned in that letter to the Birmingham jail, and our understanding of how we can and must live up to those challenges in our lives, are profound. It is challenging, upsetting the complacency of our friends, speaking out in ways that make them see that we don't agree with them. Just try talking about a major issue that you get passionate about and angry about in terms of our human impact on one another, whether it's the way we are in relationship with each other, whether it's the way we are in relationship with the world, whether it's climate change, whether it's political persuasion, whether it's about what's happening with the youth these days. Raise it with someone from another perspective, and it's going to be difficult. And so it's true that we choose to step away from creating those challenges. But I want to share with you some of the truth of why we need to have those conversations. It was raised for me by Robert P. Jones of the Public Religion Research Institute in the United States. Robbie wrote a book back in 2016 called The End of White Christian America, in which he posited that the numbers of people in the church were diminishing at the point that eventually there was going to be no white Christian America left. It's not unlike a book that was written by Stuart MacDonald and Brian Clark, university professors at the Toronto Theological School here. Their book called Leaving Christianity, published a couple of years ago, in which they watched and recorded the decline of Christian denominations in Canada, arguing that they were on a very steep decline and would not survive for very long. Robbie Jones's new book, however, is called White Too Long. He based the title on a quote from James Baldwin, who in the 1960s had this to say: "I will flatly say that the bulk of this country's white population impresses me, and has so impressed me for a very long time. as being beyond any conceivable hope of moral rehabilitation. They have been white, if I may so put it, too long. Robbie, in his book White Too Long, questions the place of white supremacy in the Christian church and argues that it is one of the most foundational structures in American Christianity. We can read that and hear that and think, oh yes, the Southern Baptist Convention, of which Robbie is a member, born and baptized in that denomination. But Robbie's statistics, and he is a statistician, tell a very different story. Not only is it the white Confederate Southerners who are racist, but racist attitudes are prevalent across all Christian denominations, including those in the North, including the United Methodist Church and the United Church of Christ, including Disciples of Christ, including the Northeast, including the Catholics, including the Episcopalians. It's across the board, these racist attitudes. The only significant, statistically relevant drop in racist attitudes occurs when the demographic are those who do not identify with any religion. And so while we, further north than Robbie's statistics might take us, are yet the benefactors of a Christianity that has come down to us through racist understandings. And so our responsibility is that we must look just as hard and just as long at ourselves as must those in the States and those in the southern states who we think are particularly problematic when it comes to questions of race. Raising those issues, saying those words with people that we know and love, yes, that is very uncomfortable, and so we generally choose not to do it. Niccolo Machiavelli, who I rarely quote, has this to say, and I so agree with this. It must be remembered that there is nothing more difficult to plan, more doubtful of success, nor more dangerous to manage than a new system. For the initiator has the enmity of all who would profit by the preservation of the old institution, and merely lukewarm defenders in those who gain by the new ones. And so this is why the Alice Walker quote becomes so powerful for me. Why any woman would give a shit what people think is a mystery to me. When we are at this precipice of change, when we finally, and in much humiliation, recognize how we have been complicit in the subjugation of anyone not white, of people who are black, our indigenous sisters and brothers, people of color who call Canada their home. When we recognize that we have been complicit in a system that has consistently denied them the same kind of rights we walk around with and don't even question, then we have to see that the world needs to be different. And we have to think that we don't give a shit what anyone's going to say about us. Because we will get to the point where change is the only option for us. The United Church of Canada, consistently with Robbie's first book about the end of white Christian America, is closing churches like crazy. Clark and MacDonald, when they wrote their book, they ended it with a chapter recognizing that the loss of Christianity in Canada is not just about closing churches. It's about the loss of social capital, the social capital that's been nurtured, born and nurtured in those communities. And that's the piece that I want you to talk about now. Because the social capital that's in our churches, that's in our small communities, no matter how big they still are, has been gifting Canada with volunteers, with philanthropists, with cultural leaders, with all kinds of support, with people who shovel their neighbors' driveways, with people who go, the extra mile for somebody they really don't know. It's been feeding back into community the benefit that people have received in those communities. By being together, by falling in love with being together, which is how I talk about church these days. By falling in love with being together, we built our own subjective well-being, good for me, but also good for the community around me. Because I see it differently. I see it as a place that's friendly. I see it as a place that needs my engagement. I see it as a place where it's safe for me to engage. As our churches close and fail, as the numbers who come out are reducing, as we see fewer and fewer people interested in the things of the United Church of Canada, we have to wonder what's going to happen with that social capital. And Clark and MacDonald, in their book, they raise that as a very serious threat to the Canada that we all know and love. What happens when there is no longer generations feeding social capital back into the communities around their churches? What happens when our churches close and nobody cares? What happens is we end up with communities where people are more afraid and more isolated, more lonely, more inwardly focused, more defensive than ever before. I have a speech that I call Falling on Your Sword. I generally give that speech to communities that are fairly wealthy, large, and have a future, or so they think they do. And I bring in the stories of Robbie Jones's first book and how generations aren't filling out from the bottom up anymore. We don't have more children than we do seniors. We don't have more children than we do middle-agers really anymore. And that's not just here in Canada, it's also across the States. And my argument has been that you need to give yourself up for communities where that social capital can be nurtured and grow. And those communities are made up of people, or could be made up of people, who don't want to use the language of faith, who don't want to redefine the word God, who don't want to listen to inspirational messages, rich and powerful and meaningful, that are based out of the information in only one book. They want to be inspired. They want to fall in love with being together. They want to engage in humanitarian activities. They want to find meaning in their lives. But they don't really have anywhere to get together yet. And so my Fall on Your Sword speech is about giving space. It's about giving leadership. It's about giving money. It's about providing opportunity. It's about invitation and not prescription. It's about, what would you like to do here? This is what we do, but what do you want to do? I don't have any answers for how we can do that and do it meaningfully. I'm not sure that we have resources that can actually do that, provide us with a script for how to get there or some kind of a plan. But I think the United Church of Canada has an opportunity here, and I think you have opportunities in your community. Conversation is not going to be an easy one, but you have to remember Alice Walker and not give a shit what people say, because it's not about being nice anymore. It's about finding ways for community to strengthen, to build, strengthen, and inspire. And it's about finding a way for people who can do that without even thinking about how you do it, and giving them the opportunity to be there. I know you've been talking about race all weekend, and I know that that's the scraping edge of the work that we have to do. Scraping because it's not even a clean cut. It's going to rip and tear, and it's going to hurt, because we have to let go of our assumptions about who we are. And we have to allow our space, our hearts, our minds to be overcome with someone else's reality, to the point that we can taste the blood in our mouth and know that we can go down and let something else emerge. I was moved by the work of Cody Dill, who was supposed to be a speaker at this conference. I was moved by his most recent poem, Breathe In, Speak Out. And so I asked him if we could use it today. It's a powerful reflection on the challenge that it is to be constantly faced with the realities that many of us never face. The injustices, the looks of fear, the expressions of anger, the indifference, the lack of invitation. Cody's words remind us that there is much grief out there that our hearts can bear too, and that we might, together, find a way beyond those things that have kept us apart so long. Thank you.
They got their arms all around my neck and I can't breathe. Arms all around my neck and I can't breathe. Can't breathe like smothering. From years, decades, and centuries of othering. They either got us locked up behind bars or pinned down behind cars. Another day, another dead. It turns the force to a farce. Protect and serve. Reject and sever. Any of the ties that ever bound us together. Or should I say chains? Or should I say cuffs? 'Cause they only hold us harder when we huff and we puff. I guess we're big bad wolves when we're riding through the hood. It's a wonder with all this bad that we're still fighting for the good. Fighting for justice? I need that out of my system. They took the roles of the cops and the robbers and they switched them. Game over. Full grown, still looking over our shoulder. For the ones who should save us? Look at what they gave us. Another man down on the ground. It's like they crave us. Like they need bodies in bags. Need to strike a windpipe for every stripe on the flag. This is breaking me. This is not what we meant when we said we'd take a knee. They got their knees all up on my neck and I can't breathe. Knees all up on my neck, I can't breathe. Can't breathe like drowning. Out in the street, out with people all around him, we're still going down. From a bullet, from a gun, 'cause we were going for a run in a white neighborhood and now our life is done? It makes no sense for me to even be saying it. If this is our world, why the hell would we stay in it? Dark people. Dark thoughts. And yet the dark deeds stay coming from our cops. He was reaching for ID and all he got was 5 shots. It puts your stomach in knots. With his 4-year-old girl in the car in the back. She had to see it all happen. I guess that's just being black. They got a gun all up in my back and I can't breathe. They got a gun all up in my back and I can't breathe. Can't breathe like anxiety, like a panic attack. 'Cause the man in blue is the man that attacks. How soon the gun clicks. It's true, only bruises ensue when black and blue mix. Every new murder just feels like suffocation, 'cause death weighs heavy when there's no justification. So please excuse a Negro if he's growing impatient. There's no measure to the size and scope of black indignation. Some call it black rage. Some call it land of the free, home of the black cage. Well, some might be dead. Some might be in prison. Some might be scared, but yo, it's one life we're given and we're still here. Still trying to survive. And we're still here. Still like air we rise. Yeah, we're still here. Sometimes gasping for air, but we're still here. Even though they blasting us out there, we are still here. Still living, still breathing, still trying to make a world for our kids to believe in. Breathe in while you can. It could be your last breath. Better use that to speak until we see the last death. Yeah, we're still here. Breathe in. Speak out. They got their arms all around my neck and I can't breathe. They got their arms all around my neck. I can't breathe.
One of the primary reasons we gather as spiritual community is to strengthen our intentions to live in ways that reflect our deepest humanity. So in this moment, we do that with one another, offering the words that you find before you on your screen, our prayer, our effort, our commitment to strengthen our intentions, so to live. We pause to breathe together, to honor the breath that gives each of us life, to breathe our lament as we repent of the ways we've taken breath from one another. We commit to listening and learning, to laying down our defenses and to working together to evolve beyond the evils of racism. We seek to do better, to live into the fuller potential of our deep and common humanity. May we deepen our resolve to protect the dignity of each person, refusing to settle for nothing less than equality and equity for all. May we give our breath as we lend our voices to the quest for freedom and equality for all. And may we place our privilege in the service of justice for those whose voices have been silenced by supremacy and complacency. May we work together that it may be so.
Choices lie before me, roads that I could take. I want the one I walk upon to be a choice that love would make. Much can be distracted
There's an ancient story our tradition gives us. It's one of those highly symbolic stories, not a story that happened in history, but stories that transcend history the way all good parable and archetypal stories do. Stories about things that never happened in a particular moment in time or space because they're stories about what's always happening. It's a story that comes from late in the 1st century of a person who was seeking sight, of someone who'd been born blind and longed to see the world with his eyes wide open. In the world of that highly metaphorical story, the wisdom teacher, Jesus of Nazareth, as the story goes, makes this very strange poultice of mud and spit that becomes a pathway for healing. And as the parable-like story goes, soon after that messy treatment, he begins to see, though not clearly at first. This isn't a story of a shamanistic healing, of some supernatural magic, the hocus pocus of mud and spit. It's a symbolic story expressing the experiences of those who had become sighted for a new vision of community. It speaks the vision of those who were finding light in the spiritual teachings beyond the patrons of their past, who were beginning to see with new eyes, with eyes wide open, seeing beyond the exclusions of their culture and religion, and seeing themselves shifted from the center of belonging. This story comes to 1st century Jewish Palestine who've taken up residence on the margins, excluded from their synagogues and communities because of the new ways they were seeing the world, beginning to see where the most marginalized might take the places of honor at the table, where the assumptions of the empire and of supremacy were turned upside down by the messy work of seeing the world with eyes wide open, seeing the world as it is, as it truly is. As we receive the light of their legacy, we give ourselves to the messy work of listening deeply, of seeing more clearly, of loving boldly beyond the boundaries, to build on that tradition a beloved community of equality and equity. I invite you to change your light as we change our light here in this place. And as we change the light, we seek to change the ways we see. As we expand and disperse the flame, may we walk together, be together, see together with those whose experience of the world is different than ours. To walk, be, and see with those who have been rendered silent or invisible. And in the light of this day, in this energy we create together, let us give ourselves to the messy, muddy, murky work of seeing the world with new and soft eyes, with eyes and hearts open.